90% of podcasts after 3 episodes don't produce another episode. Why? Because podcasting is hard. After you see that your podcast only gets 1-2 views and only a couple hundred views on social media, you're like, not for me. This is a failure. That's what 90% of people are, and that's fine if you want to be a normal person. But what about the 10%? What about the top 5%? What about the 1%? What about the top 0.001%, right? They say, okay, I might not be succeeding right now, but this failure is going to help me. Hey Schmoozers, welcome to this special episode commemorating the 1-year anniversary of Schmoozing Time. For those of you that are new here, I'm David Cobby, and I'm excited to have some fun with this episode. This is not going to be your typical Schmoozing Time episode where I have a guest on or I'm doing one of my solo episodes talking about personal branding or Judaism. This is really just going to be an episode for me to share what I've learned from starting Schmoozing Time, my podcast. Before we get any deeper into the episode, please make sure that you're following Schmoozing Time on the socials. And also, if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure that you are subscribed on both of those channels or whatever channel you're listening on, because that really helps me out. If you want to give a 5-star review, that'd be awesome too. Today's topic of the episode is really talking about what I've learned from starting Schmoozing Time. And we're going to reminisce on some past episodes and then also talk about the future and also what I've learned about myself, really. So I think the first place that I got to start when we're talking about Schmoozing Time is this is impossible without my guests. And I've been fortunate to have over 40 CEOs, former athletes, influencers, media personalities, whatever you want to call them, come on my show, talk about why they're proud to be Jewish and their personal brand. And it's really amazing hearing their stories. And really, every guest that I have is kind of like a surprise. I really don't know what I'm getting myself into with each episode, from my first episode with Adam Burshad to my most recent episode with Adam Swartz. Funny enough that they're both Adams. As first episode and the most recent episode are both Adams, but each guest is so unique and has a different perspective and has a different story. And really, I think I really go in a ton of different directions with each of my guests, which I love to do personally, because everybody is so unique and so different from one another. So that's really cool that the first part about this is I'm blessed that to have all these guests on that spend an hour and a half with me, are willing to promote the show on their social media for free, and really, like, I build good relationships with a lot of my guests. So just like for my guests, I think the first thing that I've kind of learned is I'm very blessed to have them, and I'm very blessed that they are taking the time to talk to me when they could be doing better things. And kind of to that point about what I was saying earlier, with every guest being different. The thing that I really learned from my guests is that it is really, really important to surround yourself with people that have different opinions than you do. Now, why is that? Well, it's easy to get caught in the trap of, I'm going to only associate myself with Democrats. I'm only going to associate myself with the Republicans. I'm only going to associate myself with women. I'm going to only associate myself with men, right? It's easy to get caught in that. But what I've realized is that every single one of my guests, again, have such a vastly different opinion than I do sometimes. And it helps me think more critically, not only about my podcast, but my future business, my Jewish identity. Like there's so much that we go into in each episode that I really sit there and think, I'm like, whoa, I've not thought of it like this. So I really think overall my guests have really provided me with a sense of like, hey, listen, you need to have a wide range of opinions. You need to have a wide range of people that you schmooze with in your network. It's so important. You really never know when you might need someone or someone might need something from you. So it's important that your network is not only this box of people that fall into the same bucket. Rather, you just know so many different people that it's helpful not only to you, but also the rest of your network. And kind of to that point about having a diverse range of guests, some of my guests have really needed me more than others, needed me to tell their story more than others. So there have been a handful of guests where I've put out a video or content, whatever it is, and they've gotten insane impressions on their own personal page because people really like their story and they didn't tell their story in that way before. And one example of a guest that, not that he needed more attention to his story, but Eli Hayimpour, his story about a recovering drug addict and everything that he's doing now, being on TV, now works out, is addiction free, all this stuff. Like that video alone, if you go check out his Instagram page, oh my God, it got like over 100 shares, which is crazy. 100 shares is a lot of shares. So I think there's people like that where like there's been such a positive impact, not only from the episode, but also on their social media platforms. And not saying that, again, Ellie needed that. He's already doing a phenomenal job, but it helped him a lot. And then you have people on the other side of that spectrum that really don't need my help coming on a podcast because they've been on a million podcasts before. And perfect example is Hillel Fold, who's gotten on hundreds and hundreds of podcasts, and his personal brand is already so established that like he doesn't necessarily need to go on another podcast to say, hey, I'm Hillel Fold, but he does it out of the goodness of his heart. And that to me also is like, I'm doing something out of the goodness of my heart. He came on my podcast not because he needed to, but because he was bought in by my mission and he wanted to continue this idea of Jewish pride, right? Let's be real. If I wasn't a proud Jew and I didn't have a podcast ask where Hillel would get to talk about his Jewish identity and also his personal brand, he wouldn't have wanted to come on the podcast. Like, I'm sure he gets offered a ton of podcasts and like turns them down because there needs to be that good enough ask, but also it was meaningful for him to come on my podcast and share his wisdom with everybody. And I just think that this kind of is testament of Jewish people are very caring in some good ways, some bad ways. But I personally am very caring and giving in the sense that I'm doing this podcast. You guys don't even understand what goes on behind the scenes, but I'm, for one, a very giving person because I'm putting myself out there to do this podcast. And I feel like that gets reciprocated even more, which is crazy to think about. Like I'm putting in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to this podcast, and to see that it reciprocates in ways more, even beyond Hillel, like other guests. I mean, all my other guests, the fact that they come on the podcast, regardless of their social status, is amazing to me. So, I really think like the thing that makes all of these guests so successful is they're willing to do the boring work to get good results. And I talked about this on my episode with Rafi Pinsky, where he talks about real estate. You got to do the boring stuff. You got to make the calls. You got to door knock. You got to send out flyers. There's a lot of stuff of real estate that's doing the boring things, right? And all these people that you see on my podcast are there because they're really good at doing the boring things, which is why that makes them so successful. And I really think that this gets lost often. Everybody sees the end result. Nobody sees what happens, what goes into building a brand, building a company, building a social media following. Nobody sees that. Like, let's be honest. Like, all you see is the finished product on social media. And it's cool that I get most of my guests that come on my podcast, they have some extreme form of adversity, which is I mean, obviously it's not great, but also adversity is what really builds people, and to see and hear about their stories of doing the boring things through adversity is quite amazing, and it inspires me to keep going, right? Where the podcast for me right now, where where the podcast is right now for me, it's not enough. I'm not satisfied with the results of the show and the views that I'm getting, and yeah, the guests have been phenomenal, but I want to continue to grow my guests and have even better and better conversations with more and more people. And I really think with all my guests, like they've really inspired me to continue to push hard even though there's no result. I mean, all of my guests at one point in time didn't have a result. And they just kept working and working and working until they got that result. And you're seeing and you're hearing about their story after that big result, but you don't know what goes into it. And that's kind of why I do this podcast, is like I want to show you what's going on behind the scenes with a lot of these people, because again, you really only see um, the big part of it. So, or you only really see the finished product part of it. My favorite podcaster, Ed Milet, talks about this idea of the compounding effect, in the sense of when a wave hits a rock one time, it's not going to knock the rock over, but over time that wave hits millions and millions of times, and eventually that rock erodes and you get a result. And it's kind of that same thing with whatever you're pursuing, whatever your mission is. You have to do it over and over and over and over again, with no results, with no views, with no money, with lots of struggles, lots of headaches. And then eventually you get to the point where it's like you've hit that rock enough, you've done your mission enough, that you will start seeing success. So I really think my guests have taught me a lot, and I wanted to go into that before talking about what I've learned about myself, because I've learned a lot about myself through this podcast, but it doesn't go without saying that my guests have also taught me a lot. So let's get the accomplishments out of the way in terms of things that like I've learned about myself. So one of the accomplishments is that I've released 40 episodes, and that might seem like not a significant number, but I want to give you a quick stat here. 90% of all podcasts stop after 3 episodes. So I've blown that completely out of the water, right? When you look at it from that standpoint, I have a top 10% podcast. And if you look on listenscore.com, I also have a top 10% podcast. So I really think that's a very big accomplishment of mine, of something that I've learned, is like I've beat 90% of the people in the podcast industry. But again, that's not really saying much. I have a long, long, long way to go. Like that top 10%, man, it's freaking competitive. It is really, really hard to have a good podcast. And I'm willing to work for it, though. I think another accomplishment of mine is that I've really been able to sell people on my podcast, not because it's free and I do video editing and I give people the platform to talk about themselves, but because people are bought in by my mission. And that's something I've learned about my accomplishments, is I'm able to have people buy into my mission, even if it's something that's like crazy and never been done before. There's not a single podcast out there that's talking about Judaism and personal branding. Please find it. If you find a podcast that talks about personal branding and Judaism, please send it my way. To my knowledge, there's not anybody else out there doing what I'm doing. Now, this is one that I think might be a little bit controversial, just because every list is tailored in different ways. But according to feedspot.com, feedspot.com put out a list of the top 100 Jewish influencers. And of that list, I have had 5 influencers from that list on my show. Now, again, this list is very subjective, but the people that I want to shout out and highlight from this list are: at number 48, Hillel Fold; at number 55, Amy Kreitzer Becker; number 78, Yaakov Fine; number 81, Netta Asner; and number 87, Michael Valdez, aka Hot Jewish Energy. So yeah, it is absolutely remarkable that I've got 5 people from this list on my podcast after being a nobody. Nobody knew who I was a year ago, right? I didn't have a podcast. I didn't have a brand to build on. And I've had 5 people from this list come on my show. And, just to brag for a second, like I think it's, I'm typically a very humble person, but that's pretty impressive that I got 5 of those people. I think it really shows my ability to not just only get people that are starting out and building their brand, but also people that have established their brand as some of the top Jewish influencers. So that's been really exciting from an accomplishment standpoint. So another thing that I've kind of learned about myself, aside from learning some of these accomplishments and my ability to achieve some of these things, is I've really learned that I am able to push my limits through doing this podcast. As many of you know, or I hope is communicated through a lot of these episodes, like I'm a very intense person. Like I am go, go, go from the minute I wake up to the second I go to bed. I am laser focused, locked in, I'd say 90% of the time. And I think I've shared my routine with a couple of you. Maybe I have shared it in past episodes, but essentially my schedule is I wake up around 5:45, 6 o'clock in the morning. This is during the week, obviously. Go to the gym. So I'm at the gym for about an hour. Then I head to work. I'm at work by 8 o'clock usually. Work 8 to 4, 8 to 4:30, 8 to 5. It really depends on how busy I am. Then I come home. I usually make myself a snack. And then I'm straight to podcast work for 2 hours. Take about 30 minutes for dinner. Then straight back to podcast work. Close my laptop at 9. Read. Go to bed. So I'm again, like some people think it's like insane that I do this and, working technically 6 to 10 straight with a couple breaks here and there. Yeah, it's a lot, but also through this podcast, like I've really been able to push myself to really outperform what I thought I was really capable of. And doing a podcast is very hard. Some of you may think that it's easy. Sure, it's easy to get in the podcast space, right? Buy a mic. You have a computer most likely already. Buy a software platform. CapCut is free. Very low barriers to entry. It's not from a monetary standpoint. It's very, very low. But to do it consistently, again, is hard. 90%. Again, I'm going to go back to this number for those of you that still think podcasting is easy. 90% of podcasts after 3 episodes don't produce another episode. People don't get to that 4th episode. Why? Because podcasting is hard. After you see that your podcast only gets 1, 2 views and only a couple hundred views on social media, you're like, oh, not for me. This is a failure. Right? That's what 90% of people are. And that's fine if you want to be a normal person and do what the 90% do. But what about the 10%? What about the top 5%? What about the 1%? What about the top 0.001%, right? They say, okay, I might not be succeeding right now, but also this failure is going to help me, which is kind of like which is the next point I wanted to bring up is failure is okay. I've learned that failing is okay. And I'm really putting myself out there, guys. As you know, like I don't have to make this content. I don't have to do this podcast for anyone. Like I'm happy with myself, right? Like I don't need to prove anything to anyone. I'm so confident in myself and my abilities and to accomplish my mission. But yet I'm still putting myself out there and failing. You're seeing my videos not get a lot of views relative to some other big name podcasts, right? You're seeing me struggle to make good content that connects well with people. And I know all of you haven't listened to every episode. That's on me, right? Like I should be getting people to be so bought into the podcast, but I'm not. And I'm failing at that. And it's great because I can learn from this every single day and people get to see it. One of the big failures that I've had, aside from the lack of views on social media is I set a goal for myself to reach 1,000 monthly listeners by this date. And this was last year, obviously. And again, I didn't know what 1,000 monthly listeners was. Like, I thought, oh, it'd be easy, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure you guys probably think 1,000 monthly listeners is pretty easy after 40 episodes, right? No, it's incredibly difficult. And you're only hearing about the super, super successful podcasts. So I think like the failure part has really fueled me to learn more about myself in the sense that like it's okay to fail and show people that you're failing. A lot of what you see now on social media and with a lot of my guests, right? Going back to this point earlier, is you see the polished version of them. You see everything that they're doing looks right, looks great. But in reality, they had to fail so many times to get there. And I'm in that process right now. Like I'm in the failure zone right now. And I'm failing every single day. I'm failing to get people on my podcast. I'm not afraid to share my failures with people because a lot of people are because they think failure is bad, but it's really not bad at all. And another thing that I've really learned about myself, aside from my accomplishments, my ability to push my limits and learning that failure is okay, is managing my time with this podcast has been phenomenal. I really hold myself accountable for this podcast. Like here, I'll actually show everybody. I have this set of sticky notes right here that says everything that I need to do for the week. And I cross off everything that I've done so far. So today, for example, Thursday, it says solo episode. And it really helps me hold myself accountable in the sense that like I've this list of things to do. Like if I don't get it done, like the podcast won't happen. The podcast won't be good enough. So this podcast has really like taught me to manage my time really, really well because I know that I have so much to do in so little time. And by adding more to my plate, it's actually helped me budget my time so well. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned about myself is that I find it so meaningful to help other people tell their story. And not just stories about their business, stories about their personal life, stories about their personal brand, but really all those stories kind of coming together as one and talking about the person themselves. And you've heard me help other proud Jews tell their story about their business, their brand, their upbringing, etc. That to me is so meaningful for a number of reasons. For starters, I think a lot of people don't realize that they have the platform to tell their own story. Even the people that post regularly on social media, they might be focused on like a little niche and not talking about their story necessarily. My podcast is literally like I emphasize and I stress that people make sure that they tell their story down to the last detail because I think it's so important that people share their story and talk about themselves. And that to me is very meaningful because people don't get that platform, right? There's really not a lot of people out there that are in the podcast space, the marketing space, whatever, that will tell people stories for free and really not receive anything in return, right? Like I don't expect my guests to be like, "Oh, David, let me hire you for something," right? Like, no, that's not who I am. Thank God I have a job right now where I can do this on the side and not have to worry about making an income at all. Like, thank God I'm in that position right now where most of my time, right? Like, yeah, I work and I work very hard on my day job, but the true meaning that I have right now is this podcast. And I find it so meaningful that I can do this with no money strings attached. I just love telling other people's stories because again, each individual is so unique. And especially, we talk about Judaism, all of our different backgrounds, whether you're Ashki, you're Sephardi, you're Israeli, you're I don't know, like there's just so many different types of Jews that are out there that have a different story. In America we have the ultra orthodox to Reconstructionist spectrum. It's so cool that every individual has their own story, their own way of Judaism. And then on top of that, they have their own way of branding themselves. And I just think it's so fascinating that I get to be the one that helps tell other people's stories through my podcast as a medium. So really the big takeaway in all of this, and something that I learned about myself, is I really like to tell other people's stories. And I think it's so cool that I get to do that and talk about all these amazing people on my podcast and have them share it with their viewers. So in turn, my story gets shared. It's such a very cool concept that I'm extremely passionate about. Before we wrap things up with this episode, I do want to talk about what you as a listener should expect for the next year or years to come with this episode. These are just some of my goals that I have for the podcast. They're kind of general. But I really want to refine the number one thing is creating better content. I think my content is subpar relative to some other podcasts, and I'm trying to experiment with different platforms, different tools, different AI tools to kind of make my content pop more. And it's a struggle, guys. I mean, you could see my content relative to a professionally edited in-person podcast interview. Like, it's tough, guys. So that's my number one goal, is really creating better content. And with that, the second kind of goal that I have is have more in-person episodes. And you'll actually see an in-person episode, I'm hoping, pretty soon. I have a couple on the calendar. But I think the podcasts to do the best have in-person interviews, and they're a lot more meaningful. You connect on a deeper level. So that's really the two of the goals that I have. But I think really the biggest goal that I have for you is I want to refine your experience as a listener. And with each episode, I want you to take away three things. One, I want you to laugh with each episode. I think some of my episodes have been funnier than others, just given the guest and my sense of humor on that day. Two, I want you to learn something. A big part of this podcast is being educational and talking about personal branding and Judaism and learning about different people's stories. And that's a big part of it. But the third thing that I want you to do, and I think this is arguably the biggest part of the listener experience that I'm trying to capture, is I want you to feel proud of who you are. And at the end of the day, your personal brand is very important, but you can't have a strong personal brand without being proud of who you are. And if you're not proud of who you are, I suggest you go back and listen to some of these amazing episodes with some of my guests that talk about their brand and why they're proud to be so unique from the rest of the world. Like I think each of my guests, really, I don't think there's a single person that's like the other, which is so cool. And really, each individual, I feel like, is so proud of who they are. And I'm very proud of who I am. If you ask anybody, you ask my friends, my peers, my girlfriend, my family, if you ask them who I am, I would bet that the majority of them would say that I'm very proud of who I am. I'm a very passionate young person who is very positive. And I really want people to have that same feeling of I want people to say every day, I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud to be Jewish. I'm proud to be different from other people, because it's so important that you are proud of who you are, because that reflects on your personal brand and how other people perceive you. So just to recap everything we've gone through, I talked about my guests and what I've learned from them. Really, the big key takeaway here is that I've learned from my guests that the key to success is really doing the little things, doing the boring things over time. Some things that I've learned about myself have ranged from learning that I can push my limits, have a day job, have this podcast, have a life outside of both of these things. And really, the big thing that I learned about myself is I love to tell other people's stories. It's so meaningful to me. And you should expect a new listener experience, which entails that you laugh, you learn, and you feel proud after each episode. You're going to see better content from me. and also more in-person episodes. I really appreciate you tuning into this episode. I think this episode is probably the most special out of all other episodes I've done, just because I've really gone into the nitty-gritty of what I've learned from my podcast journey. I really invite you to reach out to me and provide me with suggestions for future episodes, because I'm all ears. I want the listener experience to be really, really good. Really trying to refine the laughter, the learning, and also the feeling of pride with each episode. I'm so glad you enjoyed this week's episode of Schmoozing Time. Thank you so much for tuning in. In addition to sharing this episode with someone, make sure you follow on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube Shorts. Also, make sure you're following the show on Apple Podcasts and or Spotify. Until next time, keep schmoozing.